I do want to turn now to Donald Trump,
Sure.
where your last book continues to shed so much insight, Get Trump, because they're getting Trump. And today, a Colorado court is going to do what you and I have talked about in the past. It's going to start down this path of looking at whether he qualifies for the ballot, because some are saying under the 14th, the 14th Amendment, that he is disqualified. Now, you and I have talked about this before. It doesn't maim the president in this statute, as an officer of the United States. There's questions about whether officer is the president of the United States. I mean, we can go down a whole host of reasons, but the bottom line is what many people are saying is a sympathetic court in Colorado is looking at this. Where does this go from here legally? Because all signs are pointing to the fact that many courts, many states are looking at this ruling as a means to be able to say, well, now the courts have ruled, we can take him off the ballot.
Well, it will never be sustained by the United States Supreme Court. It would be really the end of presidential democracy in America. Millions and millions of people, not including me, but millions and millions of people want to vote for him. I have a constitutional right to vote against him, and I want to have that right. I don't want Colorado's Secretary of State or some Secretary of State in an area where they're not even elected to decide who's going to be running for president of the United States. It is crystal clear that the 14th Amendment was not supposed to substitute for the impeachment provisions or the 25th Amendment, both of which have detailed procedures for how you prevent somebody from serving in office. The 14th Amendment has no procedures. It doesn't indicate how it works. All it basically says, if you served in the Civil War in the South, then you can't serve as an officer of the United States. And it was not intended to have application in the future. And, these two candidates for office are both very old, but neither of them served in the Civil War. So I think that 14th Amendment has no application to current elections. And what could be more undemocratic than allowing a couple of swing states, purple states, secretaries of state, to determine the outcome of the election? What it would guarantee is that Americans would never accept this election. They would never accept an election in which Donald Trump was forced out by secretaries of state.
Let's just play this out for me. Let's pretend we're in Alan Dershowitz's classroom, that they allowed you back on Harvard for a minute. Let's just say the judge rules. I find that the 14th Amendment is applicable here. Donald Trump cannot be on the ballot. How does the Trump campaign respond to that procedurally?
First, it takes the case to the United States Supreme Court, which will rule, I believe, in its favor. Then, of course...
So that's, just to explain this to the audience, I don't mean... So you can literally... So a Colorado court rules, and then he gets to petition the U.S. Supreme Court right away?
No, I think he probably seeks an emergency stay from the lower courts in Colorado. And if they're denied, if the stay is denied, he can get it up to the Supreme Court very, very quickly, within certainly a couple of weeks. And the Supreme Court would grant the stay and say, no, pending resolution of this, he stays on the ballot. And, obviously you can't stop people from writing in a name. He would still win the primaries, even if he wasn't on the ballot. And we're a year away from the election. So there's plenty of time for the Supreme Court to decide.
So as I mentioned, these other states and other secretaries of state, Michigan and et cetera, New Hampshire, are looking at Colorado as a justification to potentially do this. If that happened in Colorado, if that they ruled that way and then there was a stay, is there any potential that they could still go down that path, or would that ruling have an effect on them?
No, they can still go down the path. I mean,
so this would be a whack-a-mole case for the Trump campaign.
That's right. The courts in Colorado don't bind other states. Even the Circuit Court of Appeals only binds the circuit. It would have to be decided by the Supreme Court. But I think the Supreme Court would decide to grant the stay and to allow the name to appear on the ballot pending an ultimate resolution by the court. And I'm confident that the Supreme Court, although it's ruled against Trump on many, many, many cases, would not rule that the 14th Amendment allows the Secretary of State, without any procedural safeguards, to simply take his person's name off the ballot if he has so many votes.
But so just so I'm clear on this, Colorado rules that Trump can't be on the ballot. He petitions the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court stays this pending resolution. if New Hampshire, Michigan, et cetera, wanted to go down that path, would that stay by the Supreme Court that was issued in the Colorado case apply to other states, or would the Trump campaign have to play whack-a-mole with each state going forward and petition the Supreme Court as well?
One of the things that the Trump people would do is ask the Supreme Court for a broad stay. But if this
Okay.
give it, then they'd have to play whack-a-mole. And
And
if the Colorado court does rule that he's ineligible, there would be enormous political pressures on other states to do the same thing. So then we really into, in my podcast, I call it the Dersh Show. I give out bananas, and we're up to 6 on a scale of 10 before we become a banana republic. If Colorado were to rule, it would skip 7 and go right to 8, and perhaps get close to 9. And it would get to 10 if a court were ever to say, if the Supreme Court ever to say that a president can be disqualified by a Secretary of State under the 14th Amendment. That would turn us fully into a banana republic. I don't think it's going to happen.
I mean, I honestly can't believe that we're having a serious discussion with removing somebody from a ballot for a crime that they haven't even been charged with. Never mind the constitutional interpretation of this. But go ahead.
Like Larry Tribe, Professor Lawrence Tribe, judges like Judge Lutek, result-oriented people who define the Constitution to mean whatever they want it to mean. And what they're doing is twisting the Constitution, weaponizing the 14th Amendment, turning it into a partisan tool. It's part of the problem, what's going on in universities. It's related to what's going on with Israel today. American universities and law schools have become weaponized. They've been turned into weapons to be used by the radical, woke, progressive, hard left against the Constitution, against Americans, against Jews, against Israel, and against decency, and against the Judeo-Christian tradition, and against Madison and the Constitution. That's how dangerous this is.
Yeah. I actually, and I know this is a political question, not a legal question, but do you think it would be important for the President of the United States, Joe Biden, to come out early and say, I mean, it's amazing to me as a former White House press secretary that no one has asked the current press secretary about this. I mean, which just tells you where the press is but I would have gotten asked a million times, does the President Trump believe that, would he support the ruling on this or what? But the idea that Biden hasn't had to speak out against this is somewhat amazing to me.
He should, and he should volunteer, and he should say, I want to beat Donald Trump fair and square.
Right.
I don't need 14th Amendment. I'm a better candidate. Vote for me. That's what he should be saying. And I would hope, as a result of this show and what you've been saying, that at least a journalist will ask him that question, and he's going to have to answer it that way. He could try to vacillate and say, well, this is a legal question, a constitutional question. I'll leave it to my attorney general to answer. But I think it would be much better if he said, I want to beat Trump